Stay away from the stove because this pan of prospects is sizzling. Mel Kiper and Field Yates are breaking down the hottest draft prospects in the nation. That's coming up. Plus, as always, we're responding to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams live as First Draft starts right now. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to First Draft with Mel Kiper and Field Yates. I am Greeny with you every single week during the college football season, and it is getting good. We had fascinating games last weekend. We'll dive into those. We'll dive into what they meant. We'll dive into all the players. We'll dive into all the college football conversation you're expecting. But this weekend, gentlemen, Field Yates, Mel, had a fascinating little idea. And you and I, Mel, as long-standing veterans of the ESPN scene, have been talking for 30 years about how the NFL develops quarterbacks, whether they should play them immediately, whether they judge them too quickly, all of that. And what we are seeing right now is an unmistakable trend of quarterback retreads, and I am, for those of you just listening, putting air quotes around that word because I think it is not an appropriate one to describe this. But when we look at the success of guys like Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, and what we're seeing from Mac Jones in San Francisco and so many others, we are seeing guys on their second, sometimes third or fourth chances turning into legitimate NFL stars. So on a podcast like this one, let's start with Field, because I think there are a lot of directions this conversation can take, but this was your idea, young Fielding. What do you think?
Yeah, so we had four players. I'd add Daniel Jones to the mix of the three others that you mentioned, Greeny, who were top 15 selections in the draft, who are now on at least their second team, who are playing very much like the player that you thought they might be when they were taken with a top half of the first round selection. And so I think that one of the things that we do, and I'm not trying to take myself or Mel or Jordan or Matt or anybody who does draft evaluation off the hook. But what I do think is important to note is that when we are ranking these players, we're ranking them in this vacuum, right? We are just saying this guy is the best and this guy is the second best. This is the third best quarterback. And we are completely ignoring context, which is to a degree important and notable because until April 23rd of 2026, we will not know exactly who goes number one overall. We won't know which player ends up with which team. But I do think that we have been reminded time and again that so much of these players' success, and this has some exceptions. I think Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson would be transcendent players no matter where you put them. But so many players aren't those guys, and that their story is written not just based off their own skill set, but also where they end up. And I think it's important to remind people of that for a few reasons. One of which is, and Mel can vehemently disagree with me right now, on October 8th, I don't believe there is a quarterback in the 2026 draft class that to this point has proven himself as a transcendent talent that you drop him anywhere and he changes the trajectory of that franchise for potentially 10 or 12 years. So I think that as we get closer and closer to draft time, we're going to be sitting here and ranking these quarterbacks and saying this guy's the best, second, third, fourth, and people are going to have an expectation with whoever Mel and I call the best, that player comes in and changes the franchises of the Saints or the Jets or as a very, very high pick right now. And to me, it is important to just note that we have been reminded very, very harshly, or I guess positively for the players and the teams that they are on now, that so much of this is determined upon where you end up and who you work with. And I do think that this year is a good reminder that patience is a virtue the NFL lost a long time ago. And some of these second act quarterbacks are now becoming the beneficiaries of that initial impatience.
Boy, I'll tell you, Greeny, it feels a lot to unpack there. A lot of layers of this that we could go on for hours, but I'll just sum it up. I think when you look at where we are right now, and I said this on draft day, people said, you're just defending yourself. And I said, the NFL is clueless in evaluating quarterbacks. And when I say the NFL, all of us are clueless. Okay. Yeah. We're going to have our hits. We're going to have our misses. We're going to have a gut feel. I was asked by Brian Billick years ago, and Brian came to the house and said, what's your philosophy? What's the key elements? I said, Brian, it gets down to your gut feel. The Josh Allen thing was a gut feel. The Jimmy Clausen thing, when I missed on Jimmy, was a gut feel. We know everything. We're all watching the same players. We have the same information. It's what's our gut tell us about that guy? What's the one thing that hits us more than it hits you, Field, that hits me more about that player? What am I going to overlook with this player that you're not going to overlook? Okay? What can I think can be corrected that you think maybe can't? So this is very difficult evaluations when these kids come from college to pro. Then you get to the great conversation I had in 1995 with Bill Walsh. And I bring it up again because Bill Walsh told me, he said, Mel, once a quarterback proves he can play at a high level, it's up to the organization and the coaching staff not to screw him up. Ultimately, the coaching staff and the organization will affect that kid. Once he shows he can play at a high level on a consistent basis. Daniel Jones did that one year with the Giants, didn't he?
Yeah,
Remember that year?
He did. Yeah.
Mac Jones,
outdueled Kirk Cousins.
that rookie year led him to the playoffs, correct?
Yeah,
Baker Mayfield almost had the Cleveland Browns in the Super Bowl, correct? Okay? So you think about Sam Darnold. When I would talk Josh Allen with Sam, Josh Allen stinks. Sam Darnold's the man, okay? Josh Allen, everybody was saying in year 3 is still this. They were still saying overrated one the last year. This is where everybody is with quarterbacks. They're all over the place. The one thing is, if you're drafted that high, to Bill Walsh's point, and they were talking about this with Bryce Young, when remember he didn't play in a preseason game one the last year, and I said, you can't have that, okay? New players around him, he's got to play some. Well, again, are you going to say he's too short, he's too small? If that's your philosophy, then you just write him off. Or do you think he's the great processor, he's the point guard, he can do all these things? These are all very difficult evaluations. You said 2026, there's not a guy. I think Dante Moore is the guy from Oregon. I've watched enough of Dante Moore to say 5 starts at UCLA, throw them out the window. Only a handful of starts this year. I think I've seen enough. For me, not to write it in pen or put exclamation point after exclamation point field, but I think he's clearly the number one guy right now. Will that change? Who knows? I don't say how he's going to play, but right now he's the one guy. If I'm a Jets fan, I'm excited about is Dante Moore from Oregon. Okay, but Tier unfortunately is hurt right now. We'll see what he is back. Right, Ty Simpson. If I had told you going into the year or after the Florida State game, Ty Simpson's going to be the guy that's right there. Yeah, told me I was nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, Ty Simpson looks like a guy that's a more mobile Mac Jones. Okay,
yes, he does. Yeah,
but he didn't start a game until the Florida State game. He played in 16 games. He had 0 starts. Is that enough based on the whole Bill Parcells theory? And he had 24 plus starts, 2 full years as a starter to even think about it. Plus, Dante Moore's going to be 20 years of age at the draft. That's it. Yeah. He won't have enough starts. So this is all what the debate that goes on and rages within organizations in terms of philosophy, what you believe in, what I believe in, and trying to bring everybody together and get on the same page. So to your point, just to sum it up about these retread quarterbacks, there's a couple in college football right now with the portal that were kicked to the curb and then they find a home. And then they settle back in and show what they were a couple of years ago. So evaluating quarterbacks, whether it's high school to college, college to pro, is incredibly difficult.
The only last point that I want to make, Greeny, about the application for the 2026 NFL draft is, again, Mel may think that Dante Moore is in the category of those guys that maybe is potentially transcendent. I'm not there yet with Dante. He's not even as of right now, in this metaphorical, always subject to change quarterback rankings, the number 1 quarterback in my eyes. That being said, I think if the NFL agrees with my assessment that there may not be more than one or at most one transcendent guy in this class, is what we could see is good quarterbacks are always going to go high. That 2023 draft class, 2024 draft class was a reminder when the Falcons, even after paying Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed, drafted Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall. But you might see some teams this year that are kind of like towing the line about whether they definitely need to get a young quarterback right now. Say, maybe Daniel Jones is a reclamation project. He's going to be a free agent this upcoming offseason. Can we call the 49ers and see if Mac Jones might be available? Those are the 2 most obvious names that I think come to mind right now that aren't under contract long-term. But you might see a little bit less urgency of teams at the top buying into the quarterback class because they say, maybe we bring in a player who's shown us enough at the professional level, even if it's imperfect, that we can bank on our infrastructure to bring out the best in that player going.
And you're always looking for the next best thing. I was saying, Sam Darnold was kicked to the curb because of Zach Wilson. Sam Darnold was kicked to the curb because of J.J. McCarthy. Okay? It's always the next best thing we're looking for that's unproven at the pro level, but what have these guys not shown? Okay? And I said last week, one man's trash is another man's treasure, but you had the treasure. You had the treasure. The treasure was playing at a high level. In terms of Baker was playing at a high level in Cleveland. Gone. Daniel Jones had that 1 year. Mac Jones had that year with Josh McDaniels. And the other thing is, once these quarterbacks show what they can do in the right situation, then they go somewhere else. Is it going to be duplicated? Maybe not, because it's not going to be the same system, not the same players. Everything's going to be different, right? So it's like snowflakes. They're all different. You go to a different organization, different players, completely different ball game. So that's why we love this. We're entertained by it every week. And it's always going to be up for debate, the quarterbacks at every level of football.
So I have just a couple of quick thoughts before we move on.
Yeah, please do.
To some other matters here. The first of them is, and you guys correct me because you're the experts, there is definitely not going to be at any point, and there has not been, with maybe a very rare few exceptions in history, any quarterbacks taken in the first round who didn't have the basic tools to do it, that under the right circumstances could do it. No one took a guy who can't run at all, who can't throw at all, who can't. These guys are all good enough to do it.
Yep.
So by definition, it becomes a process of what situation are they in, how well are they developed, and how does it handled once they cross that Rubicon from college to the pros. That's the first part. But for a podcast like this one, Mel, I think the relevant question is, I think Field kind of scratched the surface. Going forward, do you think a team that feels like we need a quarterback reaches for one in the first round, as we have seen done a lot lately, or it starts becoming more trendy to try and find the right reclamation project to find the next, like maybe Daniel Jones next year winds up getting paid huge money somewhere, the way Sam Darnold did, the way Baker Mayfield did. Will that slow the tide of quarterbacks getting pushed up the board when every single evaluator, yourselves including, say this guy is not worthy of a top 10 pick?
Yeah, it's a copycat league. And like I said, even last year when I was talking about Shedeur, I loved him. But hey, people were telling me, and I said this when you're going to get up, Greeny, long before the draft. And I said it to Field. There were people in the league saying, Mel, if his name was Shedeur Jones, not Shedeur, saying he'd be a third-round pick. Not a fifth-round pick, like it's to be.
Apparently a fifth,
pick. So we still know that's a disgusting on draft day because we know what happened there. But they were even saying third round. Well, he went to the fifth round, so we know what happened there. But yes, I think it's a copycat league. So when they see certain things working, oh, we can do that. No, you can't. It worked there. It doesn't work here. There's no, well, we're going to follow this point of view. It doesn't always work that way. I have a question based on what I heard. Field said, Greeny, that Dante Moore's not his number one quarterback. I got to ask him, who is, Field?
Fernando Mendoza from Indiana, who has just been playing lights out football.
I have used Oregon, right? So we'll see them both.
They do, yeah. So these two, a great opportunity. But he reminds me, I've said this on the show previously, I think he's playing a game that is somewhat similar to Sam Darnold right now. And Sam is playing outstanding football for Seattle. Just a classic game on Sunday afternoon. But Greeny, you articulate it as you are the expert on really. You might be the foremost articulator in the human history. You always say things with precision that I wish I could, but you said it better than I could. Is maybe rather than a team drafting a quarterback who is 25th on the board, 8th overall, they say, and I'm just thinking of some, obviously Mac Jones is under contract next year, but Daniel Jones and Mac Jones and, Trey Lance is right now the Chargers backup, a 3rd overall pick a few years ago in the draft, right? There are examples of players that have been there and done that from the draft process, but haven't necessarily had prolonged success in the NFL, that maybe a team says, let's roll that dice if we aren't convicted on this year's quarterback class, which again, October 8th, a lot of football left to be played. I am not as convicted as I was coming into the class or coming into the season, not even close to as convicted as I was maybe 60 days ago about this class.
Okay. And to wrap it up, in case it wasn't clear what both Mel and Field said, each of their number one quarterbacks will be on the same field.
Yes.
In Eugene, Oregon on Saturday afternoon at 3:30 Eastern start. Indiana, Oregon. So we'll get to see those two, and a monster game in the Big Ten, and with all kinds of other ramifications. Again, we are First Drafter with you every single Wednesday. We're on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel. We're on ESPN2 later in that day. Maybe you're watching us there right now. Okay. And don't forget, you can scan the QR code you see on your screen to hear the entire season's worth of analysis from these two. Okay, let's transition to what was another huge weekend in college football. And let's begin with Miami and Florida State. I have a social post here from Zach Couts, who writes, which quarterback that isn't currently projected to be drafted in the first round has the best chance to play their way in? That brings me, Mel, to a quarterback who a year ago at this time we thought was going to be a first-round pick, then fell completely out of that conversation, then transferred to Miami, and now I think is going to win the Heisman. Let's talk about Carson Beck.
Yeah, interesting, because in 2023 with Georgia, he was outstanding. And that's what led you into all that talk and all those projections about Carson Beck. Is that particular year, he's at 72.4% with 24 touchdowns, 6 picks, also had 4 rushing touchdowns, had 28 touchdowns he was responsible for, 6 picks. Then you think about the talent around him, right? Bowers was injured some that year. McConkey was injured some that year. Yet Carson Beck was out there dealing it, right? So when Carson Beck, the supporting cast is key. Why? Because he's not that mobile. He needs the O-line to protect him, okay? He needs that fortress in front of him. At Miami, he has that. And he has Malachi Toney, who is a young superstar receiver, and others, and a run game. So he's got all the pieces around him necessary to be back there feeling confident, dealing it with a very clean pocket. And he's doing exactly what he did in 2023, this year in 2025 with Miami Hurricanes. Now, he checks boxes, 27 plus starts going into the year, right? 27 plus this year. So he's going to be in that 40 plus range, okay? He's 23 years of age in November. He's a veteran, okay? He's been there at Georgia, done that. He's been there at Miami, and he's doing it. So, yeah, you need to support him. He's kind of like a Mac Jones in that area. You need to support him. He's not going to beat teams with his legs that often. He needs that pocket, but he can throw the football accurately. His touch on the deep ball, that's the notes I have, ball placement, touch on the deep ball, discipline to take the check down when he had to. All these things are NFL caliber for him right now. But the help he's needed, he's getting at Miami with a team that arguably is as talented, and they're showing it, as anybody in college football.
He's been playing great. I think my stance on Carson Beck is probably well-rooted in recent conversations we had. The talent is certainly there. The size is outstanding. I love the experience. That's another factor that I think could play into this year's draft class, is teams might be saying, let's go for the experienced college player, because while these guys are all a projection to the NFL level, we've seen some guys with a lot of experience under their belt have some pretty reasonable starts to their career. As I mentioned in, I believe it was last week's show, maybe the week prior, I think the question with Carson Beck is, going to be some of the makeup stuff. How much of a alpha leader is he relative to other quarterbacks who may be in that conversation for one of the first 5 or 6 taken in this year's draft class?
Fascinating. And last week when we did, each of you did your top 5 quarterbacks, I don't remember his name being mentioned. Would just as a quick follow-up for both of you, and then we'll just move on. And Mel, would he crack that top 5 now?
Yeah, it's right there. And then we got John Mateer as well. It's going to be running. Lenore Sellers is talented, but how does he finish? So I think the top 5 is tricky. Mendoza, we'll see. He's got to be there. Certainly, there's no question about that. Ty Simpson, to me, has got to be in that mix. But for me, it's Dante Moore. For Field, it's Fernando Mendoza. John Mateer's got to be there. And then really 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to leave Arch Manning out of that equation because he wouldn't be in there anyway. I said, take him off the board. Just let him play college football. Sam Levitt, same thing. Nico at UCLA, same thing, right? Drew Hours dropped down significantly. Cade Klubnik's dropped down. Garrett Nussmeier's dropped down, right? So a lot of these quarterbacks we thought would be there, whether they were young underclassmen or they were veterans, have not panned out, okay? And that's allowed a Dante Moore, first year as a starter since when he showed he couldn't get it done as a number 1 guy coming out of high school. He showed this year what he's made of. Mendoza built on the Cal situation where he played pretty well to play great under Signetti, as Rourke did last year in that great system there. And certainly Ty Simpson at Alabama has been, for what he was and what he is now, you got to be kidding me. I mean, the only thing that hurts him a little bit is he's so competitive, he won't let a play go. He wants to make a play. He won't throw it away. He's just so competitive. But boy, when he lets it rip, he can throw it, he can move, coach his son, father's the head coach at UT Martin. A lot of good things going on there with him. And then we got to see what John Mateer does coming back, because guess what? Had he been playing, we got the Red River rivalry coming up. He won't be there. You got a guy who would have been way up there. So I think to answer your question, Greeny, the quarterbacks, I'm doing my top 10 positional rankings next week. It's going to be interesting to see because you're splitting hairs with some of those guys in that 4, 5, 6 range.
Absolutely, from Miami. So there's a couple of players that we're interested in. Let's go on with some more. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. We got 2 wide receivers to talk about. Mel, beginning with Chris Bell.
Oh, boy. You talk about impressive over the first few weeks of the season, but really put it together the last 2 weeks. Got off to a good start. Over the last 2 weeks, it's been uncoverable because he's that power forward at 6'2", 223. And he's not he'll body catch once in a while, Field and Green, but not as much. He's snatching the ball more. And we'll get to a receiver you like, Field, who never body catches. So for Chris Bell, the consistency catching the football has been there all year. The last 2 weeks, he has been on fire. He's getting yards after the catch. Okay, he is a power forward all the way. And I think this is a kid who you wanted to see, would he be week to week consistent? And he has been. And over the last 2 weeks, I got it right here. 12 catches against Virginia, 10 catches against Pitt. He has had big catch after big catch. Throw it up, he'll get it. He's eliminated any of the drops. So when a kid has that kind of physical ability that Chris Bell has, he's going to go pretty high. So he's right now one of the more, I wouldn't say improved, but he has put it together. He's been there a long time. A lot of these guys are portal guys. He's not. Chris Bell has really maximized all that talent we knew he had this season with the Louisville Cardinals.
Yeah, Mel, that 6'2", 220-pound frame, sort of, and it kind of looks like this to me a little bit of Xavier Legette type build coming out of South Carolina. These guys who just have almost like baseball player lower halves with just gigantic, powerful legs. Another wide receiver that has my attention, he had our attention coming into this season, but he was great this past Saturday. And to be clear, I said Ruben Bain's been the most impressive player in college football this year, and I should have denoted amongst draft-eligible players, because Jeremiyah Smith continues to look like the best player in all of college football, but his teammate, Carnell Tate, wide receiver from Ohio State, was also outstanding this past Sunday in a gigantic win, lopsided win, I should say, against Minnesota. 9 catches, 183 yards, and a touchdown. Mel mentioned it. This guy's got outstanding hands. What a great route runner he is. Incredibly high football IQ. Ohio State wide receiver track record is as good as maybe any school, or at least tied with LSU going into the NFL. Carnell Tate is a Chicago kid who's been playing at Ohio State since he was a true freshman, had to wait his turn. Waiting his turn has paid off in a masterful way. This guy is the real deal now. He looks like the kind of player that could go in the first 50 or so picks. And maybe even, by the way, that might be a conservative guess right there, because one of the headlines, I think, for this conversation is the wide receiver class is fairly open right now. I would argue, personally, Jordan Tyson, Arizona State's the best that I have studied so far this season. But beyond that, kind of open season there. I think the NFL is keeping an eye on which guys might emerge to become that second, third, fourth best wide receiver in this year's class.
As I mentioned before, we love all of your social feedback. Please hit us up using the hashtag FirstDraft. And here's just a super quick one, guys, for both of you. And this is from @Northern Bayer. Wants to know about you guys' top 3 running back prospects. So let's talk about some running backs. And Field, let's start in South Bend.
Yeah, I really feel like there's a case that the biggest gap between the best player at his position and the second best player at his position right now is running back, with Jeremiyah Love, who had yet another outstanding game this past weekend, up over 100 rushing yards against Boise State. Notre Dame exactly where it needs to be. They run the table. They're going to make the college football playoff. I have no doubt about that. Kind of a quiet week 1 for Jeremiyah Love against Miami. But this is a player who was excellent last year. He gutted it out late last season in that college football playoff while playing through injury. And he, to me, just feels like a classic first-round running back because he has such value in the passing game as well. He's a real weapon for Notre Dame in the passing game. CJ Carr, by the way, their quarterback, outstanding young player. And just as an aside, it was not this past Saturday, but the Saturday prior, Jen Latta, who does remarkable storytelling for College Game Day, had a piece on Jeremiyah Love that I thought was beautiful and just worth your time if you have 6 or 7 minutes to spare, about how quality of a young man he is, on top of being, I think, Mel, clearly the best running back that's draft eligible this upcoming year.
And Jadarian Price, his teammate, is a really good one too, number 24. So
yep.
You have Love, and you can move him out like a wide receiver. Marcus Freeman said he's our Reggie Bush. And then you have a Jadarian Price, who is a guy north-south, and boy, he can hit that hole, and he runs with conviction. Okay, that's a dynamic duo, those two kids, when you have Love and Price in the same backfield.
Sure.
And then, Mel, how about Michael Trigg? Is another, I'm not sure running back is the right way to describe him, but he's sort of an interesting, Swiss Army knife of a player.
Yeah, he's the H-back, move tight end. His blocking needs to improve, but as a receiver at 6'4", 240, who was at USC, then to Ole Miss, and at Baylor, he's really come on. And really in this game against Kansas State, it was late third quarter into the fourth quarter where he was a huge factor. Made a spectacular one-handed catch. When he tracked the ball, he tracked it over his shoulder, but that one-handed spectacular catch that he made, in the fourth quarter down the sidelines is why you get excited about a guy like Michael Trigg. The way he catches the football in this game, he's done it all year, and he's put that talent. We talked about putting it to the maximum use on the field. Michael Trigg has done that consistently. He's kind of feeling it. He's confident. He's attacking the football. He's got ability after the catch. He's a talent, this kid is. And we knew it when he went to USC. It didn't materialize. Same thing at Ole Miss, and now he's at Baylor putting it all together. So Michael Trigg as an H-back move tight end fits the bill from that vertical passing game, which you need for those types of teams. He will be impressive, and he will be a guy certainly on their radar.
All right, the next stop is Cincinnati, where they need some good football news. Watching the Bengals right now play without Joe Burrow actually makes my eyes hurt and my heart hurt. It must be so painful for their fans to watch how that franchise has just plummeted since the injury to Joe Burrow. But if there's any good news, is that they've got some really good football players at the University of Cincinnati and field that starts with their quarterback.
Yeah, Brendan Sorsby, who I'm wondering, is he available? Is he eligible to play for the Bengals starting right now? Because they could certainly use him with the way the offense has played over the past 3 games. And Sorsby was previously at Indiana. They, in 2024, turned the keys over to Curtis Rourke. Huge win for Cincinnati over Iowa State, previously unbeaten this past Saturday. And Sorsby is a dual threat quarterback. He's got nearly 300 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns already this season. But he also has 12 touchdowns through the air and just 1 interception. One of the initial premises on the show today, Greeny, was talking about how I don't believe right now there's like this great consensus and this conviction on the quarterback class compared to where it was coming into the season. There's no transcendent prospect in my mind. I think because of that, at least for me, my eyes are more open to players, to more and more players, right? Ty Simpson entering the Derby, as Mel has discussed. Sorsby, who is, I believe, has another year of eligibility, but he has entered the mix as well. I'm putting him on the monitor list just for the way that he has played and the dual threat nature. Lacks ideal size. That being said, playing really good ball right now for a Cincinnati team that I believe just cracked the top 25 of the AP poll.
Yeah, and well, they should. In Greeny and Field, they got a defensive player that when I watched that game Saturday, this is Iowa State, right? Cyclones. And this is a team playing Cincinnati, and the Bearcats, you talk about on the offensive side, but on the defensive side, Jake Golday grabbed my attention. He just jumped out at you. And this was a kid, when you do the background checks on these kids and find out where they came from, at a high school, not highly regarded, goes to Central Arkansas. Who was at Central Arkansas? A guy named David
Walker.
Fourth round pick of the Bucks last year, right? He goes to Central Arkansas. You move him to linebacker in 2023. He takes off, right? Then he goes to Cincinnati. Last year, he's their second leading tackler. He's added weight. The physicality. Booger McFarland talks about physicality. That's the way Jake Golday plays. And whether it's tackling, just his overall presence. He's 6'4", he's 240 now. He's fast, he's physical, he's athletic. They move him around. He'll be covering a slot. He'll be outside off the edge. He'll be off ball. They move him all over the place. He was everywhere against Iowa State. 12 tackles in that game, breaking up passes. Early in the third quarter, broke up a pass, got us into the coverage and did a great job there. Tackles well. When he comes up to gets his hands on the ball carrier and space, doesn't matter behind the line of scrimmage, they're going down. This is a kid that right now, think about this. He's their leading tackler. The second leading tackler, second, is 21 behind Jake Golday. 21 tackles behind Jake. So when you talk about where Jake Golday has gone from Central Arkansas to Cincinnati, he's put together 2 outstanding years. He's going to test well. I think he was on Bruce Feldman's freak list, like 48, 50 in that area. So this is a guy who was an attention getter from a talent standpoint. When you put talent with production and versatility, Jake Golday to me is a clear-cut guy to Greeny. Friday night, day 2, Jake Golday, okay, we'll be hearing his names called. You'll be saying he's as good as gold. Hey, he's as good as gold. And his kid can play. I love the way he flies around the field making plays.
I'm putting that one in my notes right now. Friday night, that's me. Once you get to Saturday, that's Reese's problem to deal with. But I've got Friday, so I've got Jake Golday. Okay, before we wrap up for today, 2 more quick hitters, Mel, that you sent in for us. The first one, the offensive tackle from Boise State.
Yeah, Cage Casey, and I look at him, he was beaten once for a sack late by a really good pass rusher at Notre Dame. Bottom line is he's got athletic ability. I saw him down the field as well, making a block. He keeps that frame between the defensive end and the quarterback very effectively on a consistent basis. He's a guy to watch. And then when you talk about closers, you got to keep closers away. And I think Cage Casey as a left tackle you can develop out of Boise State. Cassius Howe, we had talked about him as a closer getting after the quarterback when he had those 3 sacks and successive plays, remember, against Utah State. He built on a great year, a great end of year in 2024. Okay, was Auburn, Texas, and USC. He had the majority of his tackles for loss and sacks in those final 3 games, and he built on that so far this year, where he's been spectacular. Now, Utah State 3 sacks, Auburn a sack, then 3 sacks in this particular game for Cassius Howe against Mississippi State. He hit Blake Shapen's arm, created an interception in this game. He was at Bowling Green. He was another guy we talked about.
Right.
Jake Golday going from Central Arkansas, right, to Cincinnati. Cassius Howell was at Bowling Green, had 9.5 sacks there his final year, which led to Mid-American Conference. So he did it at Bowling Green. He's done it so far at Texas A&M, and he's been not just a one-game wonder. Okay, he's been multiple games now. Cassius Howell off the edge has done a heck of a job for Texas A&M. Talk about closing out the first half and closing out the game. This kid has proven he can do it. Cassius Howell, Texas A&M, a kid who really gets after the quarterback, and he's done it on a much more consistent basis this year. They say building off that strong finish from 2024.
Yeah, not trying to be a broken record. I believe he's also that 31-inch arm length type prospect, this Cassius Howell, if I have my numbers correct there. But there's some serious juice coming off the
now
edge.
They get on you about arm length. They got on me.
Listen, Mel,
Feels my blocker this year.
You can come at me.
The arm length from now on. After Will Campbell, you got it started. I've been that way all my whole life. So Field Yates an arm length, not me.
Go check the receipts on Will. I stood by Will throughout the entirety of the process. So I was saying, hey, it may matter to some, but in the case of Will Campbell, does not matter to me. We'll see how it shakes out, but so far the early returns have been positive for Will Campbell. But Cassius Howell can flat out rush. This guy is supercharged pass rusher with some serious athleticism coming off the end.
All right, so once again, all eyes on Indiana, Oregon, among the other games this weekend for Mel's number one quarterback versus Fields' number one quarterback. We will see how that all plays out. And that is all the time we have for this week's edition of First Draft. Again, a reminder, scan the QR code you see on your screen. You can catch up with any episode you may have missed the entire season. Do not forget, you can tune in every Wednesday on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. You catch us on ESPN2 and anywhere you get your podcasts. So have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy all of the games. Mel's got his notebook ready. And for Mel Kiper and Field Yates, I am Greeny. We will see you next week.